Friends, grace and peace, another word of welcome to you. First, an apology. All the music picked today is my fault. Please don't blame Sarah or Mark. It's been brought to my attention that all the hymns we sing today come out of the Catholic hymnal. My fault. There's some PTSD flashbacks to my childhood. In staff meeting this morning, I said, I'm so excited to sing these hymns today, and all the staff said, we don't know any of these hymns. Thought everybody just grew up in Catholic school. Apparently not. So, an apology. Next, a promotion. Carol had mentioned a couple of opportunities to express those feelings of lament. The chalkboard's in the atrium, but also if you need something else, something maybe more verbal. Thursday nights at 6 o'clock, we're going to offer a space that we're calling Let It Out. And you are welcome to come with other folks. Everyone who shows up, you're going to get 3 minutes to say whatever it is you need to say. It can be about your health, it can be about your family, it can be about politics or football or whatever you need to say. No one is going to say anything in response. No one is going to tell you how to fix it. No one's going to disagree with you. It's just an open space to let out whatever is weighing you down. So that begins this Thursday at 6 o'clock, and I hope if that is a helpful space for you, that you will come and I'll help moderate that for us. All right, let's move into Lamentations, which I recognize is not the most cheerful of readings, but here we are. So reading from Lamentations, the first chapter. Jeremiah the prophet writes, "O God, how lonely sits the city that was once so full of people. Once great among nations, she has now become like a widow. Once a queen over provinces, she has become a slave. She weeps bitterly in the night, her tears on her cheek. None of her lovers comfort her. All of her friends have lied to her. They have become her enemies. Judah was exiled after suffering and hard service. She lives among the nations. She finds no rest. All who were chasing her caught her right in the middle of her distress. Zion's roads are in mourning. No one comes to the festivals. All her gates are deserted. Her priests are groaning. Her young women grieving. She is bitter. Her adversaries have become rulers. Her enemies relax. Certainly the Lord caused her grief because of her many wrong acts. Her children have gone away captive before the enemy. Daughter Zion lost all her glory. Her officials are like deer that can't find a pasture. They have gone away frail before the hunter. While suffering and homeless, Jerusalem remembers all her treasures from days long past. When her people fell by the enemy's hand, there was no one there to help her. Enemies saw her and laughed at her defeat. Jerusalem has sinned greatly. Therefore, she has become a joke. All who honored her now detest her, for they have seen her naked. Even she groans and turns away. Her uncleanliness shows on her clothing. She didn't consider what would happen to her. She's gone down shockingly. She has no comforter. Lord, look at my suffering." This too is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. It was one lone sandal. That's all the old prophet could stare at as he rubbed his wrists, still sore from the handcuffs that held him captive. From his prison cell, he could hear Babylon's armies amassing, the thunderous steps of thousands of warriors, the ting of swords being sharpened and the hiss of fires being lit. He could feel the earth shake as cavalry moved into position and as battering rams picked up speed. He could smell the smoke seeping through the city and taste the heaviness of the summer air. But when this nightmare that Jeremiah had warned about, of how Jerusalem's worship of foreign gods and their insatiable greed and their reckless neglect of the vulnerable, how it would only result in Babylon knocking on their door, Jeremiah wasn't there to see it. Because who wants a preacher calling out the names of the poor while priests amass unimaginable wealth? Who wants a protester rallying for peace while kings build endless empires? Who wants a prophet crying for justice when judges tip the scales with ease? And so, tired of his constant complaints and his tiresome takes, Jeremiah was arrested, silenced by Jerusalem's most powerful, confined to a dungeon where the only audience for his sermons would be the rats that scurried from cell to cell. But on that late summer day, as the boots of the trampling warriors receded, and the sounds of swords were stilled, and the fires moved from a hiss to a smolder, Jeremiah rose from his confinement only to find the once great city of Jerusalem in ashes. The city that was once so full of people now sat silent. Not with the silence of peace, but of absence. Streets once bursting with festivals and music, now scattered with rubble. The marketplace where spices once filled the air, now reeked with the smell of blood and bodies. The great walls protecting the holy city had been cracked open like clay pots, and its gates ripped from their hinges. Solomon's temple, which had been the meeting house of God, the place where heaven and earth touched for the past 400 years, now torn down to its foundations, its altar kicked over like trash, its adornments turned into spoils for the victor. Everywhere Jeremiah turned, despair had the final word. The proud city had been brought low, just as he said it would. The priests who busied themselves with wealth now wandered the streets with empty hands. The kings who once dreamed of empires were now slaves in their own streets. The judges who tipped the scales of justice were now the ones begging for mercy. And standing in the ruins of it all was Jeremiah, not gloating, but weeping, rubbing his wrists, still sore from the handcuffs that held him captive, staring at that one lone sandal half buried in the dust, a silent memorial to the person who fled and would never return. 2,600 years later, an Episcopalian priest by the name of Barbara Brown Taylor will write, "When despite all my best efforts, the lights have gone off in my life, and I have been plunged into the kind of darkness that turns my knees to water, I've learned that there are things in the dark that I could never have learned in the light." That's exactly what the book of Lamentations is for us. It's the prophet Jeremiah's poetic journal chronicling his grief and his sadness and his anger in the days and the months and the years following his survival of the most catastrophic event in Israel's history. Lamentations is not a book of answers, but a book of tears. It's not a hymn of triumph, but a dirge of grief. This is not a book with a happy ending. And in all honesty, I confess it probably isn't the biggest pick to get everyone excited for a new program year and to encourage new folks to come to worship or to join the choir on Monday. I get that. What Lamentations is, though, is real. There is no sugarcoating the suffering. There are no cheesy platitudes to be offered that will numb the pain. These are words written on top of the rubble as Jeremiah looks out onto a once great city that is now nothing but piles of ash. Even today, in some Jewish traditions, the book of Lamentations is read in its entirety as the congregation sits on the floor with their heads sprinkled with ashes. Because it's not just a lament of the past, but it is also something that is very much current. Something that is part of our pattern of life, which is why Jeremiah chooses to write this book in such a way that brings order to his grief, but is also put in a way that demonstrates how pervasive this kind of grief can be, from A to Z, quite literally. The prophet pens 4 of these 5 chapters, 88 of his 110 verses in acrostic form. Every verse beginning with the next letter of the Hebrew alphabet. A to Z. Aleph to Tav. As if to say, this kind of grief knows no boundaries. That lament is something which ripples deep into every corner of our life. From A to Z, grief shows up. And so Jeremiah begins in the beginning. Oh God, how lonely sits the city that was once so full of people. It's been 20 years now since Hurricane Katrina made landfall. 20 years since New Orleans became synonymous not just with jazz and a good time, but also with total desperation. You can almost hear Jeremiah's own lament in the words of the Jefferson Parish president as he spoke with Meet the Press while the flood waters continued to rise around him, wailing out to anyone who would listen, "Nobody's coming to get us. Nobody's coming to get us. For God's sake, shut up and send us somebody." "20 years later, that city is rebuilt. The French Quarter is alive with music again. Bourbon Street is flooded with party goers once more, and the levees whose failure caused so much of the devastation have since been repaired. But the truth is that New Orleans is not the same. Not everyone came home after the storm. There are parts of the city that still remain empty, whole neighborhoods boarded up and vacant, left like a wound that will not heal. Author Jesmyn Ward put it in the starkest of terms when she wrote in her memoir, "Before Hurricane Katrina, I always felt like I could come back home. And home was a real place for me. Because of the way that Hurricane Katrina ripped everything away, it has cast that idea into doubt." And New Orleans' lament is not alone. This is not the story of just one place or one city or one people, but one that too often gets repeated throughout history. This morning, the same lament of New Orleans is the same lament rising out of Gaza. Just 48 miles from Jerusalem and separated by 2,600 years of bitter political division and partisan violence, the devastation looks hauntingly similar. Today, the landmarks of life in this region have vanished. The roads mourn with potholes and broken pavement. The gates grieve with twisted steel and barbed wire. The playgrounds stand bitter, repurposed now as graveyards. And the 2 million people who call this place home now displaced into an area roughly the same size as the city of Moore. Just as Jerusalem's marketplaces once lay in ruins, so now the markets of Gaza lay silent. Just as the temple was torn down to its foundations, so too are the holy places where people once prayed are now reduced to rubble. And just as Jeremiah witnessed priests wandering empty-handed, so today we see families who are scattered, children who are growing up in tents, parents who are mourning a past that has been lost and a future that appears nothing more than bleak. In a rapidly expanding famine that the UN Secretary General has described as a failure of humanity itself. Whatever our politics may be in this particular conflict, the human toll is undeniable. Oh God, how lonely sits that city once so full of people. So what are we supposed to do when the world is in ruins and when grief feels bigger than we can handle and where there is no quick fix to all the chaos? I think Jeremiah offers us a potential answer here. We lament. Not in an attempt to solve the devastation, but rather to give it voice, to bear witness to it, to stand beside it, to refuse to give in to that silence. Lament is a screaming into the darkness, demanding that God wakes up and pays attention to the suffering. Lament is a prayer that dares to speak truth to the sorrow while believing that God is still listening. Lament is a hope hidden inside of our tears. Lament is an act of faith when everything around us tells us it is pointless. And so we lament. We lament with Jerusalem, with New Orleans, with Gaza, those cities once so full of people. We name the ruin and we name the pain. We cry out in the silence and we dare to believe that God hears us. And that with this stubborn hope, the God who met Jeremiah in the ashes will still meet us too. Because here's the truth. Lament is not the end of faith, but rather lament is the beginning of hope. God, I pray that is true. In the name of the Creator, and the Christ, and the Spirit.